Morning. Hope all of you are doing well. Today we're going to be learning Maseches Chagigah Daf Beis Baruch Hashem, starting the final Masechta as we have it in Seder Moed. And starting at the top Mishnah, we're going to be speaking about, of course, the Chagigah, which is one of the korbanos that was brought in the times of the Beis Hamikdash when one was fulfilling the mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel. We have an obligation to go up to Eretz Yisrael. Please God, it should be Mekuyam in this next Chag that is upon us on Pesach, that we should be able to bring a korban Chagigah. Let's learn some of the halachos yihiratzon. It should be halacha l'maisa. Hakol chayavim b're'iyah. Everyone is obligated in the mitzvah of re'iyah. What does that mean? Take a look at Rashi, top line, Dibur Maskal, Hakol chayavim b're'iyah. The mitzvahs re'iyahs kol zechurecha. That's what the pasuk says, that all the men should attend. Should srichim v'hisroos ba'azara v'regel. There's a mitzvah deoraisa, not just to show up to Yerushalayim, not just to show up to the Beis Hamikdash area, but to be in the Azara on the Regel. That's the mitzvah that we're discussing in this Masechta. Okay, everyone's obligated. We're going to have to figure out what the word Hakol means. Whenever we have a sweeping word like Hakol, the Gemara always asks, Hakol asuye mai. We'll spend some time talking about that today. But let's finish the Mishnah first. Everyone's obligated, chut mecher short of a katan, except for someone who is a deaf mute, someone who is mentally limited, and v'katan, a child who is not yet a bar chiyuva. As well, v'tumtum v'androgonus. A tumtum is someone for whom we cannot identify their anatomy, if they're male or female. V'androgonus, androgyny is where they have both, a representation of both anatomies. V'nashim, women are exempt. V'avadim and she'ena meshuchrarim, slaves that are not yet freed. Chagigah, someone who is lame. V'hasuma, someone who's blind. V'hachola, someone who's ill. V'hazakin, an older person. U'meshe'enu yachol la'alos biraglav, and someone who is not able to go up to the Beis Hamikdash on their own 2 feet. We'll discuss this more in the Gemara. Ezu katan, how do we define a katan in this regard? Very simple. A child who's not able to ride on the shoulders of his father to go up from Yerushalayim to Har HaBayis, he can't sit for that long. Divrei Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel argues. Beis Hillel omrim, that how do we define a child in this regard? Says the Gemara, any child who's not able to hold his father's hand and walk up there. Why does he say walk? So says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, Shne'emar shalosh regalim, the 3 regalim. That's not clear as to what he's talking about. So let's take a look at Rashi, 8 lines down in the Rashis. It says Rashi, shalosh regalim, haroi lalos biraglav chiyef hakasu. Only someone who's able to walk is one who is mechuyev. It's a play on words. Shalosh regalim, raglaim. You have to be able to walk there in order to be chayev. So let's finish up this Rashi. The kevan de gadol. When you have an older person who's not able to walk, he is pater min haTorah. So therefore, katan lav bar chinuchu. We don't have a mitzvah of chinuch for a katan, where had it been that he was an adult, he would have been pater. So therefore, this child is that the parameter for the mitzvah of chinuch for a child, for the mitzvah of re'iyah, is can he walk there? Let's finish up the Mishnah. This sugya will be disconnected. The Mishnah says, Beis Shammai omer hariyah shtei kesef. The olas re'iyah has to be 2 silver coins. V'chagigah, the korban chagigah, has to be ma'a kesef. It's a different unit of silver. And Beis Hillel argues and reverses the pricing. Beis Hillel omer no, olas re'iyah ma'a kesef, v'chagigah shtei kesef. Fine. Let's get into the Gemara. The Gemara says, Hakol la'asuye mai. What does the word Hakol in our Mishnah come to teach us? La'asuye, says the Gemara, answer number 1. We'll have a few answers. When the Mishnah says Hakol, what is it coming to include that I wouldn't have otherwise thought? It would be someone who is a half Eved and a half Ben Chorin. This can happen when there are 2 owners over 1 person. Ula Ravina, that answer to say that a Chatzi Eved and Chatzi Ben Chorin is included in our Mishnah, that only works according to some. It doesn't work according to Ravina, because Ravina specifically says the following: that person's not included. So according to Ravina, our Mishnah can't be saying that it's coming to include a half Eved and half Ben Chorin. Therefore, Hakol la'asuye mai, back to our question. Answers the Gemara, answer number 2, the answer that would work for Ravina. La'asuye chiger b'yom rishon v'nispashet b'yom sheni. Let's say a person was a lame, he couldn't walk on day 1, but he improved enough that he could walk on day 2. Oh, so says the Gemara, Hakol is to include that person. You're right. On the first day of Pesach, he wasn't able to walk, but on day 2, he's better. He can walk. He can handle the pressure on his foot. Wonderful. Now he has a chiyuv. Yesterday he didn't have a chiyuv on day 1. Today on day 2 he has a chiyuv. Says the Gemara, that's not across the board. Hanicha, that only works in regards to the following. That each day has its own obligation and its own separate korbanos. However, according to the one who says that all of the korbanos from day 2 and on are simply related to day 1 korban, and you didn't bring day 1 korban because you were a chigar on that day, you couldn't walk. So therefore, that case of chigar b'yom rishon v'nispashit b'yom sheni, that person's also going to be pater according to this shita that kulan tashlum and derishon, that all the korbanos of the holiday are dependent on the korban of day 1. And therefore, we're back to our question here, according to this shita, who says kulan tashlum and derishon. We no longer have an answer. Let's go to the third answer. Therefore, akol la'asuye mai, 2/3 of the way down, daf beis and aleph and Maseches Chagigah, la'asuye suma ba'achas meina. We're coming to include a person who's blind in only one eye. Now, if our Mishnah is coming to include someone who's blind in one eye, that they are included in the mitzvah of Re'iyah, then udeloki haitana, it's obviously not like the following brisa. Titania, Yochanan ben Dahavai Omer Mishum Rabbi Huda, Suma be'achas me'enav patur min Re'iyah. A person who is blind in one eye, they are exempt from the mitzvah of Re'iyah. Shneamar yireh, the pasuk does say yireh. It looks like the word yireh, but it sounds like the next word, which is yera'eh. Kederach shebal liros, kach ba leiros. The way that one would normally see, that is the way that they will be obligated to be seen. What does that mean? Ma liros b'shtei, just like normal people look with 2 eyes. Therefore, af leiros b'shtei. Therefore, one is obligated to be seen in the Beis Hamikdash only when they have 2 functioning eyes. Otherwise, they're exempt. It's a drasha in Chumash. It's not personal. It's a drasha in Chumash that a person who's blind in one eye is simply exempt from the mitzvah. And therefore, our Mishnah is of the opinion that yes, we include that person, but this brisa that we just learned disagrees. Really, there are some who hold that really the answer to the question about kol la'asuye mai is simply la'olam kida amri me'ikara. It's like the first answer that we gave of chatzi evet and chatzi ben choron is the case to be included. However, maybe you would say, wait a minute, we asked a kasha on that. We said that according to Ravina explicitly excludes a person who's chatzi evet, chatzi ben choron from the mitzvah of Re'iyah. So therefore, how would Ravina understand it? Lo kasha, don't worry about it. We have a great answer. Kan kimishna rishona, kan kimishna achrona. The first, there's 2 different ways to understand the halacha that we're discussing of chatzi evet and chatzi ben choron. How do we see this? Titnan, 3 lines from the bottom, Beis Amud Aleph. Misha chetzu evet v'chetzu ben choron, a person who is a half evet and half free, oved es rabo yom echad. How does he spend his time? One day he serves his master. V'es atzmo yom echad. He has alternating days. Divrei Beis Hillel. Amar len Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai kicks up the sand. He's like, what are you talking about? First turn of the page. Daf beis amid beis. Takantem es rabo. You found out how he should balance out serving his master. However, es atzmo lo takantem. But you didn't solve the other problem, which is that he has a chiyuv to have children. Because if he's half Jewish, whatever that means, if you're a chatzi ben choron, then you have an obligation to have children, but he has no one to marry. How so? Second line, Lisa shiv chaynu yachol. He can't marry a goya because she's a goya and he's a half yid. A bas choren, he can't marry a bas Torah, he can't marry a frum girl, can't marry any Jewish girl, any yachol, because she's Jewish. That's not, he's half goy. So that doesn't work either. So says the Gemara, libatel, if you're going to say he's just supposed to be mevatel, the mitzvah of him having children, that can't be. The halo, we have a din. Lo nivra ha'olam ela lepiri of a rivya. We have a din, we have an idea that one of the great purposes of the world is for piri of a rivya. Shnei amar, as the pasuk says in Chumash, lo sohu v'ra'ah, lo sheves yitzara, that the world was not created to be desolate. It was created to be settled, and therefore we should have children. So if that's true, how can you say, Beis Shammai says to Beis Hillel, how can you say that there is this world of chatzi ben choron where he serves his master one day and he's free the next day? It doesn't help. The guy's still not fulfilling halacha properly. And the Gemara continues and says, Ela mipnei tikun olam, Beis Shammai's shita is 5 lines down, that in order to properly do our obligations in the world, kofen es rabo v'ose oso ben choron. Therefore, because we need this chatzi evet chatzi ben choron to keep halacha properly, therefore, what do? So then we force the owner to make him a ben choron. The kosev lo shtar al chatzi damav, and he writes a contract, and the money transacts so that half of his cost is paid out. Fine. And then what's the conclusion of this Mishnah? V'chazru Beis Hillel lahorus kedibur Beis Shammai, and Beis Hillel is like, Taka, you're right. We need to free this person. But what was the beginning of the Mishnah and what was the end? The beginning of the Mishnah is that there is such an idea as a chatzi evet chatzi ben choron. And the end of the Mishnah is that no, Beis Hillel says we're not allowed to keep that anymore because Beis Shammai was really right about it. We need to free him so that he can get married to a Jewish girl. And that's what Ravina was talking about on the previous Amud. We had said about Ravina that Ravina was of the opinion that chatzi evet chatzi ben choron is pater, and that all plays out in this Mishnah. That's how we can understand our Gemara, and therefore, in conclusion, as we get to the 2 dots, about 8-9 lines down on Beis Amud Beis, we asked the question about Kol Asuye Mai. What was our Mishnah coming to include? The case that was not explicit in the Mishnah. And the Gemara answers, the final answer is to include a case of Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin. Next sugya. We said Chutz Mecher Shotev Katan, and says the Gemara, Ktanim, it seems to be from our Mishnah that it's taught that a Cheresh Dumya de Shotev Katan, that the Cheresh has to be similar to a Shota and a Katan. Ma Shotev Katan V'lav B'nei Deya. When we're talking about a Shota or a Katan, where we assume in halachic terms that they have no da'as, Av Cheresh D'la Bar Deya. We therefore also assume that a Cheresh, he also has to not be a Bar Deya. The Kamash Malan Kiditnan. What does this come to teach us? Like the following Mishnah. When the Chachamim speak about a cheresh, what are we talking about? It's talking about the type of person who is she'eno shomea ve'eno medaber. He is a mute and he is deaf and he is also mute. However, what's the implications from this? Had it been that he was medaber ve'eno shomea, that he spoke but couldn't hear, or shomea ve'eno medaber, then that person's not considered to be like a shota and a kata where he lacks das. That person is considered to be a bar das, and therefore chayiv. He would be held accountable for the mitzvah of re'iyah. So if you only have one of those medical issues where you're either deaf or mute, you're still chayiv, only when you have both. Tanina lahad tanu rabban, and this is reflected in the following brisa. Hamedaber ve'eno shomea zehu cheresh. A person who can speak, but he cannot hear, that person is called a cheresh. Shomea ve'eno medaber zehu ilaim. A person who can hear, but he cannot speak, that person is an ilaim, he's a mute. Zevazeh, if he can speak and hear, then he is considered like a pikeach. And therefore, what's implied from here, as Rashi highlights, is that our Mishnah teaches us that the only person who's exempt is a person who is a cheresh that's doma l'shota, in that he has both things wrong with him. How do we know that the language is right? The Brisa had said that a person who can speak but can't hear is called a cheresh, and a person who can hear but can't speak is called an ilim. It's a mefurish pasuk halfway down on Beis and Beis, says the Gemara. The pasuk says, "V'ani kecheresh lo eshma." I am like a cheresh and I can't hear, but it doesn't say you can't speak. And the rest of the pasuk says, "Uch ilim lo yiftach pi." But when it comes to not speaking, we use the word ilim. Therefore, we see that when it comes to being deaf, the person is referred to as a cheresh. When it comes to being a mute, the person is referred to as an ilim. Another way to understand this is his words were taken away from him, but it doesn't mean that he can't hear. So we were of the opinion that if a person, we made an inference from a brisa, that if one was either only deaf or only mute, he's still chayav. The brisa writes, medaber ve'eno shomea and shomea ve'eno medaber pater. The brisa writes explicitly not like that. We have a brisa that goes against the diuk of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah left us room to assume that if you had only one of these medical issues, you'd be chayav. But over here, it seems to be explicit. It is explicit that you're pater. So the Gemara says 8 lines from the bottom, Amar Avina v'Tema Rava, really chasura and mechsera. Really, these brises are just a little unclear, and v'hachik tani, we need to reword them a little bit. Let's learn this new version of the brisa. The Gemara says as follows: Hakol chayavin b're'iyah uvesimcha. Everyone is obligated in seeing and in happiness, but this is not just seeing and happiness. It's the olas re'iyah and the shalmei chagigah. These are korbanos requirements. Except for a cheresh who can speak but cannot hear, and shomea ve'eno medaber, and a person who can hear but cannot speak, shepater min hariyah. Yes, it's true. When you have one of these medical issues, you are exempt from the olas re'iyah. However, ve'afal pisha pater min hariyah chayiv b'simcha. So we're getting another nuance here that we didn't have in the previous conflicting brises. We're adding in a distinction between shalmei chagigah and olas re'iyah. If a person is missing one of these features, they either cannot hear or they cannot speak. So then they're pater from re'iyah, but they're still chayiv in simcha. Ve'eshe'eno lo if someone is missing both of them, they can't hear or speak, and a shota and a katan, pater af mina simcha, then they're exempt from both the shalmei chagiga and the olas re'iyah. Why? Because and the olas and the shalmei simcha, because and they're exempt from all mitzvos in the Torah, as the Gemara, as the Brisa says, Tanya nami hachi, and with this Brisa will conclude at the top of Gimel Amar Aleph. Hakol chayavim b're'iyu v'simcha chutz mecheresh hamadaber ve'eno shomea ve'eno medaber. Everyone is obligated in the olas re'iyah and in the shalmei simcha, except for a cheresh, someone who's deaf, hamadaber ve'eno shomea ve'eno medaber. Those people are exempt. They're sheptur min hariyah. If someone can't hear or can't speak, they're exempt from Re'iyah. But the Brisa concludes, like we assumed above, like Ravina said, even though they're exempt from the Olas Re'iyah, they're still Chayav B'Simcha. However, the Brisa concludes, so that's how the Gemara fixes these seemingly conflicting Brisas. And we say that if one can both hear and speak, they're obligated in everything. If a person can only hear and not speak, or speak but not hear, then they're obligated in the simcha, in the shalmei simcha, but not in the olas re'iyah. And all of this is supported in the brisa. And a person who doesn't have either of those, they can't hear at all and they can't speak at all, they're patur from all the mitzvos in the Torah. We'll stop right here, 3 lines down on the top of Gimel Amud Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful day. We'll come back together on Shabbos in Yirtzeh Hashem. Unlike usual, Shabbos daf will be 45 minutes before mincha. So you can just check the schedule. Looking forward to seeing you then. Wishing you all a beautiful day.